Coming up on A Courageous Heart.
They had to shut off the blood supply to my lower extremities because I was bleeding to death. By doing that, it killed the nerves inside my spinal cord, leaving me to never walk again.
A Courageous Heart with Karen Dye.
Hello and welcome to A Courageous Heart. I'm Karen Dye, your host for today's program. It's interesting how life twists and turns and takes us down a variety of different paths. And for women, it's always important to have a really cute pair of shoes to walk that path. Today I'm going to introduce you to a young lady by the name of Phaedra Olson. I think you're going to find that her story of overcoming one of the biggest obstacles in her life after a life-changing event is going to inspire and empower you to live each day courageously for Jesus Christ, as well as wear a great pair of shoes. Because after all, it isn't all about the shoes, it is about the soul. And today you're going to meet a woman who truly understands that, and she has a courageous heart. Phaedra, take me back to when you were 22 years old. You're a beautiful young woman. Tell me what kind of hopes and dreams you had for your life and what you were doing back then.
I thought I had a spectacular life. I had an amazing child. I was a preschool teacher. So basically my job with that was to teach other kids how to do ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. I was pretty qualified. and I was also a part-time model. I had attended Barbizon International School of Modeling, and I thought my life was great. I had a great group of friends, and I enjoyed life.
So life is good. You're enjoying life. You are pouring into these little ones' lives, you and your son's life. But then there was a pretty life-changing event that occurred for you, Mother's Day weekend, 1996. Can you take us back to that day, Phaedra?
Yes. It was a day like any other day. The weather was absolutely beautiful. It was the end of the school year. It was May. And that night there just started to become a very, very light mist that came out. It was the kind of weather where you wanted to wear a sweatshirt and yet you still could wear shorts to get by with. And my friends and I had had a wonderful day planned. We intended to drive to Columbia, Missouri. We were going to go out for dinner, and we did. We had pizza. It was great. And we then went to a concert. And even though I can tell you I didn't enjoy the concert, but I had a great time with my friends. And as we were coming home, things changed. There were 7 of us that night. There was the car in front of me that had 4 of my friends in it, and then there was my car. And I had 2 passengers with me. I was driving. When we were both struck by a drunk driver. My friend was going up a hill and around a corner, and he saw the drunk driver coming into his lane, so he was able to get over. They kind of sideswiped cars. That drunk driver was going approximately 75 miles an hour when he hit him. By the time he hit him, it slowed him down to about 45 miles per hour. I didn't even see him coming. I was going around the curve when we hit on what was considered a nearly head-on collision.
So you're hit by a drunk driver just that quickly. In the blink of an eye, your life has changed. Take me through the next few weeks of what happened. I mean, I can't imagine being hit almost head on, even at 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour. There had to be some serious injury. And for those who are tuning in, they're seeing that you're in a wheelchair. So catch us up. What happened after that?
When they took me in for open heart surgery, they didn't have time to prepare my body the way that they do for most open heart surgeries. So when I was taken in, they had to shut off the blood supply to my lower extremities because I was bleeding to death. By doing that, it killed the nerves inside my spinal cord, leaving me to never walk again.
Phaedra, when I hear all of those horrific injuries in and of themselves, I mean, I would expect the body to go into shock and to just kind of shut down for a while, but when I hear the aorta is pulled away from the heart in that impact, that makes me tend to believe that it's a miracle that you even made it to the hospital. Did the doctor say anything about that, that perhaps there was a bigger play at work here? Because most people would die within a few minutes of having an aorta pulled away.
Well, most people die before the ambulance even has a chance to get there. So for my situation, I was actually taken by ambulance to Jefferson City, Missouri, to a local hospital there. And when they couldn't discover the injury, I was then taken to Columbia. Now, when that occurred, the doctors have told me that the average person doesn't make it. They even told me, Phaedra, we don't know how to treat you. Most people do not survive with this injury.
A miracle, if you ask me. 8 hours have passed. Most people don't survive 8 minutes. And here 8 hours have passed. What is your walk with the Lord at this point? You're 22 years old. Were you familiar with God? Did you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Would you have expected a miracle? Would your family have expected a miracle? Just give us a little background on your faith relationship.
I had been raised in Christianity my entire life. I was raised primarily by my grandparents. My grandmother was a Lutheran. My grandfather was a Pentecostal. We went to both services. And the same with the ministry. When I wasn't with my grandparents, I was with my aunt and uncle. My uncle was a Baptist minister. And so my entire life, I've been raised at a Christian family home. I've had that personal relationship with God. But I have to be honest with you, it kind of scared me when people told me what my life was intended to be. I was frightened because my entire life, everyone had told me that I had a calling upon my life and that God had called me to work in the ministry. I was a little freaked out by that. Especially at that young of an age, I wanted to go run and be playful, and I didn't really want that responsibility. It wasn't what I was looking for, but I knew that I would get back there. Mm-hmm. So when my crash occurred, that's exactly what happened. Not one time did I ever ask, dear God, why did this happen to me? Instead, I knew that God was going to do whatever it takes to allow whatever to happen to save me, because that's exactly what he did, was save me by putting me in this chair.
That's an interesting thing to say, Phaedra, because a lot of people would have been in your circumstances and woke up to find out that they're never going to walk again, and they would be angry and bitter. And to hear a young woman who's had her whole life ahead of her say, that's exactly what God used this for, was to save me. Did you believe you were going to go to heaven now, or did you know you were going to go to heaven, but he saved you by fulfilling the purpose in which he was going to call you to do? Did he have your attention, I guess, is what I'm asking you.
Karen, of course, God got my attention. And let me tell you, it didn't take much to get there. Because when I was in that coma, and I woke up from that coma, and I still couldn't figure out how I was functioning. I mean, I couldn't breathe on my own, but yet I had something that was breathing for me. I knew that I had came to that spot where I needed extra help, and it wasn't going to be anything that any doctor or any nurse could be able to provide me. It was something that I had to find, and I could only find within myself. As I laid in that hospital bed, there in the University Hospital, I had no one else around me. I had no doctors, no nurses, no church congregation, no altar to bow down at. But I was able to lay there, and I was able to talk to God, because only he could hear me. And at that point, I asked the Lord, I said, please come back into my life. Please be there for me. And he was. When no one else was, he was there.
I think a lot of us get to that moment, probably not as dramatic and as drastic as the moment you were in. You shared with me that at one point you called them your doctor, and the white coats came in. They usually have at University Hospital students with them that come in and talk to the patient and learn from whatever the situation is. And you said at one point they came into the room and were speaking, and you didn't really understand a lot of what they said, but you understood one thing, and that was, we're going to take her off the machine today. Now you're lying there, you're paralyzed, you can't move, you can't communicate with your hands, you can't communicate because you're breathing on a ventilator, but you understood, they're going to take me off the machine today. And you shared with me what was going on in your mind, and it was something from your childhood. Tell our viewers what that was.
Karen, when I was back in those Pentecostal churches, my cousin used to sing a song called Brand New Touch. And the chorus of that song is, Lord, I need a brand new touch. My strength from yesterday is gone. And if you give me, Lord, another touch, I'll have the strength to carry on. And as I laid in that hospital bed, unable to move my legs, my arms, even my head to be able to turn, no other voice except my inner voice that was praying and singing that to God.
I love that hymn. And you did get your brand new touch from God. I think so many times, Phaedra, we do miss out on those opportunities of just being completely still. You were sort of forced into it. But a lot of times, if we would just in the midst of the chaos, just be completely still and listen to that inner voice. Now, we fast forward a little bit. You recover. You have that fresh touch. You're off the ventilator. A few more weeks go by and you actually leave the hospital. And it was then that God began to unfold the plans. And I love that you came out of the hospital and you said you were not angry or bitter. You never questioned why. You just knew you had to get on with it. So tell me, what plan started to unfold in your life where you knew that you were designated for this exact purpose?
Actually, Karen, it started before I even left the hospital. I started with an agency called Think First. And they actually started bringing students into my hospital bed so that I could share my story while I was in the hospital. By the time I got out of the hospital, I already had churches and other ministries contacting me to ask me to go in and speak at their services. It started immediately. God had his plan prearranged before I even left that hospital room.
So people are coming into your hospital room right away when you're able to tell your story. Is that a good thing? I mean, did they ask you first, are you willing to talk about this? It sounds like they didn't give you much time to even wrap your brain around what had happened.
Well, Karen, it didn't take long at all for that buzz to get started around the hospital. I was already sharing with the nurses and the doctors. And so as the people started learning and experiencing the fact that that's what I was doing, the talk started to begin. And when you had nurses that would actually work just weekend shifts, and when they would be there and leave that Sunday and then come back the following weekend, they were expecting me to be gone. And here I was awake, sitting up and learning to eat all over again. So of course I was able to just share that story right away. And matter of fact, the doctors actually asked my mother, they said, did she always talk this much?
That is so cute, because I can remember being a little girl and getting called into the office all the time, and my parents were constantly in the teacher's office, and they'd say, her grades are fine, but the girl will not stop talking. She's always visiting with people, and I can see a little bit of that in you as well. And I see a pattern of God likes talkers. He likes people that are willing to go out and share the message. And even though I don't believe for one second that the Lord caused that drunk driver to hit you, I believe that was the enemy in his finest trying to destroy your spirit and your purpose. But God said, I can take this, Phaedra. If you come back to me, I can take this and I can use it for my glory. He knew that he had someone who was bold and outgoing, and he knew that he had someone who had that seed planted at a young age and would come back and do what he had called you to do. So you're ministering while you're still in the hospital after experiencing this horrific accident, finding out that you're in a wheelchair. There are a lot of folks that are viewing today and say, that was not my experience. I have been confined to a wheelchair and I'm angry. I'm angry. I shouldn't be here. This was not my choice. What do you say to folks? Because I know that you still, you speak quite a bit, and we're going to talk about that in a minute of what God has you doing today. But what do you say to someone who's sitting there watching going, well, she's beautiful and she smiles. I don't understand. What is it? What's her source?
Karen, it's not always been easy. I can tell you that for sure. There have been days when I have been down and I have been sad and I have wanted to cry. But there's something that keeps me going. You know, I believe that during that time that I was in that coma for 3.5 weeks, I believe that there was a battle going on like no other human could ever take care of. There was a spiritual battle. You see, the enemy tried to take me away from this planet. He tried to take me away from this because he knew the ministry that God had planned out for me. But God said, you can't take her. I'm taking her. And that's exactly what happened. And when you have those type of thoughts and that type of energy that comes and flows through you, I can look at that glass and say, you know what, that's half empty. Or I can look at it and say it's half full. And that's exactly what I have to do. You see, sometimes it's a conscious decision that has to work your way down into your heart. I can have those bad days, but I have to tell myself, you know what, it's going to be a good day. I'm going to make someone laugh. I'm going to tell someone about my life. And I'm going to tell someone about my experience and my faith. That's what keeps me going through.
I think a lot of Christians think sometimes, Phaedra, that God will just swoop in and make our circumstances perfect right away. And if we are good enough and we follow him enough and we pray enough, that's what happens. But a lot of times he takes our circumstances and he uses them for his glory. And I know lots of times I have to make a choice when I get up in the morning. Am I going to run toward you, or am I going to run away from you? Am I going to believe what your word says, or am I going to believe what man says? And you're right, you are exactly right on, that it does start in the head, and you just will find your emotions following if you're telling yourself the truth, which is found in God's word. So tell me today what you're doing today. You are a vibrant young woman, and you have so many amazing things going on. One of the things that truly excites me is how you're working with victims who are involved in drunk driving accidents. So catch our viewers up to date on what your career field is today. Well, I call your ministry.
For the past 10 years, I've actually been an employee, but for the past 12 years, I've been working with an organization called Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I have to tell you, it's been a wonderful experience. Through their help and through everything that they've given us, they have allowed me to be able to have that open door to be able to go into many, many other schools, to civic organizations, places that I don't think that I would have actually had the opportunity to go into. And now that's what I do for a living. I work with victims, and I'm with them, and I help them through the criminal justice system. I help them find support and the guidance that they need. Sometimes it's financial aid, whatever it takes to be able to get those victims through that struggle.
Let's talk about the person who hit you just briefly, because there are a lot of people who have been wronged. There are a lot of people who have been hurt by others. And sometimes letting go of the anger and the bitterness can be a very painful process. A lot of people don't know how to do that. Tell me where you're at with that. Did you ever meet with the person that was driving that other car? Have you been able to forgive them? Just catch us up to speed on how you feel about that.
Karen, I pray for him. You know, when I go out and I do my public speaking, and as I do television or interviews, anything that I do, I never say his name, because I would never want to humiliate him or put him down in any way. I have to pray for him. I've never seen him outside of the court setting, outside of a courtroom. I've never seen him. And it's okay. It's okay. You know, by actually praying for him and praying for only the best in his life is the way that I'm able to get through. I'm not going to let bitterness or anger keep me out of heaven.
Forgiveness is an interesting thing. You know, it's difficult for us to do in our human flesh, but then I think we have to remember what God did for us in putting his son on that cross so that we could be forgiven and have a relationship with him. And when we really start to put things in perspective, I think we really do realize that by hanging on to bitterness and anger and hatred, we're not harming the other person at all. We're keeping ourselves in prison. And so I really believe that the Lord gave you a special touch there as well, that you were just able to get past that, do what you needed to do, but then move on and pray for him every day, because it is difficult, and we are instructed in God's word to pray for our enemies, to pray for those who have hurt us. Bader, I want to ask you, how is it, if you could sort of synopsis what God has shown you from 1996, when you were 22 years old, and that driver hit you and took so much away from you, to where you are today in your ministry of working for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, helping those victims, and the beautiful woman that you are today that sits and smiles and has that little glisten in her eye. If you could sum up what God has done in that time, what do you think are some of the main lessons that you've learned as a child of his?
Karen, there's so much that I've learned over the years. You know, I've learned that I have the power of prayer, you know, because when I can pray, things happen. God listens. I learned that firsthand. I've learned the importance of life, and the importance is always to keep God first and your faith first, and then the rest of it will fall into place from there. I have an amazing husband, and you know, along with that husband, he brought in a beautiful daughter, and I have a wonderful son, and together we have a strong, wonderful family. We have a family that we can laugh, and we can enjoy each other's company, and I appreciate that so much. And then when it comes to anything else, it's all pretty trivial, and that's the way that I look at it. I've learned that material possessions don't mean much, but you know, it's you know, those material possessions, they really don't mean anything. It doesn't matter how nice my home is. It doesn't matter what type of car that I'm driving. It doesn't matter any of those other things, as long as I have God and then my family. And those to me are the important things of life.
When we're in those pits, when we're, in those deepest, darkest moments in our life, and for you it had to be when you were totally paralyzed and couldn't speak because you were on the ventilator, and things weren't looking real optimistic at that moment. I think it's in those times that we really do start to value what it is that's important in life, and faith certainly is it, and family and relationships. So let's focus on that a little bit, because that was such a dark time. I'm sure you didn't even know yourself what joy awaited ahead of you. You mentioned your wonderful husband, Eric, and he is just a delight. We have so enjoyed meeting him today. Tell us how you and Eric met, and a little bit about the romance. Now, girl, I want to get into your personal life here a little bit. I want to see how you transitioned from this is what happened, this is my ministry, and oh yes, God allowed me to fall in love.
My husband and I technically kind of met through our children. And it was wonderful, actually. And from the day that we met, from the very moment, we've never spent a day apart. We've seen each other every day. And that was over 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago now. And even if I've gone out of town for a business trip or gone out of town for whatever reason, I've either had breakfast with him or have seen him some point that morning. And then when I returned, we've been together. And we have just been so happy ever since. I knew from the moment that I met him that that was the one that God had planned out for me. And being single for so long, being a woman in a wheelchair, I honestly had kind of given up on that fact. I had, matter of fact, I just told my pastor just a few weeks prior to meeting Eric, I said, I'm done. I am done dating. I'm not doing it anymore. I don't need that part of my life. I just need to understand that I have a relationship with God and that He's going to fulfill my needs. And once I got to that point is when Eric came knocking on my door. Over and over again.
A lot of women would want to say, okay, how did you know he was the one? You say, I knew exactly that this was the man that God had prepared for me. Give all the girls a little tip here. How did you know?
I had been single a long time. And so during that time, I was praying for a mate. I was praying that God would send me someone that He wanted me to be with. I had dated many, many men, and they never had all those characteristics. So I started praying for specifics. I was praying that I wanted someone that could love my son as much as I do and that could accept him as his own. I wanted a man who had a strong Christian value and a strong Christian faith. Someone that could actually be that spiritual leader of our household that would say, it's time for church, it's time to go. Someone that whenever we went to bed at night, we would actually hold hands at bedtime and pray to our Lord and thank Him for our family and thank Him for the gifts that He has given us. I wanted a man with a job. That's important. And, and those were those qualifications that I wanted. I needed someone that could see me for who I was and not someone that could see my wheelchair first. And when I met Eric, he had all of those qualities. And as soon as I did, I started counting them off. He goes to church. He loved my son. He loves his family. He loves the Lord. He has a job. He's going to be able to take care of me. And he saw me for being me.
So many times I think people watch our program and they wonder, oh, that's wonderful. She must be so solid in the Lord, and she sits around and reads her Bible all day long, and she's just so spiritual, and that's why she's so joyful. But you actually have figured out that Jesus died so that we could have life abundantly and not just white knuckle it until we get to heaven. As a matter of fact, He's put a lot of things on this earth that we can enjoy, and He says to enjoy them, and that moderation is good, but to enjoy them. You have quite a little hobby going, and one of the things that I wanted to share with our viewers is, tell me what one of those little guilty pleasures is that the Lord has put in your path and that you just absolutely light up over.
Karen, I do. And it's actually my little obsession here with shoes. I love shoes. But I have to tell you, it goes beyond that. I didn't really want to be remembered as the woman in just the chair. I wanted to be remembered as the woman in the chair with the really cool shoes. And really, that's kind of how my shoes are. Most of my shoes are just like almost over the edge, but not quite. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's a great opener. It's a great conversation piece. It doesn't matter where I go. Somebody says, hey, I like your shoes. And that gives me a great opportunity to be able to share with them my story and to be able to talk to them about things. But I love the shoe.
You know, I love that you love the shoes, and I love that God didn't just kind of leave you without the desires of your heart. He brought Eric into your life. You loved fashion. You said you did some modeling before the accident. And he didn't forget any of that. He actually let you get your girl on and do something really special recently. I'm sitting here talking to Miss Wheelchair USA. Tell us a little bit about that.
Being Miss Wheelchair USA has been just a surreal experience, that's for sure. I had the opportunity of competing in a pageant with other women in chairs who every single one of us deserved to be on that stage competing. And, you know, I think society in general just doesn't see women with disabilities or people with disabilities in general as beautiful. And the reality is we are. We are prominent citizens, we are doctors, we are lawyers. We are out there in our communities on a daily basis giving back to our society. And we all have something special that we can do. And by being Miss Wheelchair USA, it has really given me a platform to be able to talk about drunk driving and how that affects our nation on a regular basis. But not only that, but it also gives me the opportunity to be able to share my faith and to be able to go out there and meet so many wonderful people.
Phaedra, it has been so much fun sitting here and getting to know you. And I tell you, I'm so honest. When I look at you and when we've been sitting here talking, I don't see the chair. I don't see it. I just see this amazing woman of God who has found a way to give back to him and to love him and to do what he has called her to do in spite of her circumstances. I want to ask you, are you happy? Are you really happy? And what would you say to those who are watching today who are going through a very difficult time? How would you encourage them?
Oh, Karen, most definitely. I'm happy. I can actually tell you that I'm happier now being in a wheelchair than what I ever was before. And I know many people find that very difficult to believe, but it's very true. I've learned those importance and those values in life. I've learned that I have a walk with the Lord. And even though the last place that I walked out of was a non-Christian environment, out of a non-Christian concert, I know that the next place I'll be walking into are the gates of heaven.
Amen.
And I know the wonderful things that God has for me. He has a wonderful opportunity for me to prosper. So if you're going through something that's rough, I know it's rough, but stand strong on your faith, stand strong on your belief, and know that God too has a plan for you.
If you would like a DVD copy of today's program, you may order one through our website, www.courageousheart.org. The preceding program was made possible in part by the following ministry partners: Mike Kehoe Ford and Meyer Electric Incorporated. If you would like to be a partner of A Courageous Heart or make a one-time donation, please contact us through A Courageous Heart at www.acourageousheart.org. A Courageous Heart is a viewer-supported ministry.